In this video, we're going to talk about the federal system of government that we have here in the United States and how it connects our nation, so our larger government, our federal government, to our states and the state governments, because they have different roles when it comes to our lives, and it's going to be really important to understand. So the first thing that we have to understand here is the framers, they wanted a strong national government. They wanted to change from the Articles of Confederation, but at the same time, they wanted states to keep their power as well. So they accomplished this goal by creating what's called a federal system of government in which the power is shared between state and national governments. This shared government can be seen in the image to the right. Now here's another image of how our government splits kind of the task of the state and national governments. As we can see here to the left, the powers of the national government include such things as coining money, setting up a postal system, maintaining military forces, and declaring war. Some state powers are conducting elections, establishing local governments, establishing schools, regulating interstate commerce, and then we also have shared powers. So these shared powers are things such as guaranteeing civil rights and liberties, levying and collecting taxes, providing for public safety, and protecting public health, among others. Now first we're going to go over some powers that belong to our national or federal government. Probably the most important power of the national government includes regulating interstate commerce. So this is a confusing term. Hopefully I'm going to break it down for you here. So regulating interstate commerce, what it does is it gives the national government the power to regulate the market, or trade, and create a free trade zone. So the national government, it has the power to make sure that states aren't going against each other necessarily, that the United States is a free market and it doesn't cost a business so many taxes to have their business or trade in other states. Essentially, our country is kind of a free market. When we think of trade, there's no state lines. Now, there's a lot of advantages to having this interstate commerce regulated by the national government. So these are going to be important to understand and something you need to know for your test here. So the advantages are that, one, goods and resources are going to flow more easily across our country. Obviously, that makes sense. The second advantage is that it's going to be easier to create large businesses that cross state lines. And then third, it's going to help create a single national economy. Alright, we're going to go over this here using the example of Target. So Target, we know, is a big business. There are many Targets throughout the country, and it doesn't necessarily matter what state you are in. Target overall is going to help our economy as a nation because it's a big business. A lot of people go there, a lot of people are spending their money there, and it's creating money flow throughout our country, which essentially is giving money to our government. If the national government did not regulate interstate commerce, we would not have businesses like Target. Each state would have their own business like Target, but that business would not be able to cross state lines. They would not be helping our country's economy as much, and the businesses just would not be as big as Target because Target can spread from all the way to the East Coast, all the way to the West Coast, and if the national government didn't regulate interstate commerce, companies would not be able to do that. Next, we're going to explain state powers. So it's important to understand here that the Constitution does not state out specific powers of the states. Therefore, it says nothing about schools, nothing about owning property, nothing about marriage, etc. Instead, it says that states have all powers that the national government does not. So this is left a lot to interpretation, and this is why it's still kind of fuzzy between state power and national government power. It does not specify that each state, the one thing that it does specify, is that each state must carry out laws and court decisions from other states. Here's some examples of this. So an example is, everyone knows a driver's license. So this, in the Constitution, it states that something like a driver's license is issued in a state like Iowa, and therefore other states, such as Illinois, Minnesota, they have to accept an out-of-state driver's license. So other states must carry out laws and court decisions from other states. Another example of this is criminals. So criminals cannot escape by fleeing to another state. So we hear a lot of times, especially on the news, of criminals getting caught in other states and being brought back to Iowa. So it is the state's duty to incarcerate an individual and keep them in a jail in another state until the state is allowed to go and get them and bring them back to their home state where they're wanted for whatever crime they have committed. So once again, to recap, the Constitution doesn't say anything about the powers of states. All it says is that states must carry out laws and court decisions from other states. That being said, if we look at the powers of the national government, right here, this is what the Constitution specifically says the national government has the power to do. Everything else is going to be on the right-hand side. So everything that is not in the Constitution is in the responsibility of state governments on the blue side. Now we're going to explain shared powers and how the national and state governments share powers between each other. An important term that goes along with this that you will need to know is federalism. So federalism is the sharing of power between state and national governments. Some shared powers that the national and state governments have is that both can raise and collect taxes. You've heard of, obviously, the income tax. That is a national tax. But there's also a state income tax, for example. And so both can raise and collect taxes. Both can build roads, borrow money, as well as regulate education, which means give funds for education. Federalism is fairly complicated, as the Constitution kind of only provides a general framework for this. So the states have continued to work with the national government to straighten this out. So when we're looking at the shared powers and the federalism of our country, we're looking at the green box here. Some shared powers would be guaranteeing civil rights and liberties, levying and collecting taxes, providing public safety, protecting public health, establishing courts, punishing lawbreakers, borrowing money, and constructing and maintaining roads. These are the shared powers that our state and national governments both take responsibility for.